Hello and welcome back to Indistinct Chatter. I'm Eliza, and today we are doing a little This Day in History, sort of. But first, the news. First up, I took a break on updates regarding this war that we're in because, frankly, I still don't understand why we're at war. Obviously, gas is now getting a little too close to that $5 mark here in the Springs. If your car takes premium, you just might need to take out a small loan just to fill your tank. But the price of gas isn't the story here. The real story is how close we just came to making things a whole lot worse. On Tuesday, President Trump was literally an hour away from launching a massive retaliatory military airstrike against Iran. To give you the backstory, over the weekend on May 17th, 3 explosive drones hit a generator right outside the main perimeter of the Baraka nuclear energy plant over in the UAE. Military tech tracked those drones back to Iraqi territory backed by Iran. Trump was fully ready to pull the trigger on a counterstrike, but he abruptly called it off at the last second. He posted on Truth Social that Gulf allies and Middle Eastern leaders basically begged him to hold off to give last-minute diplomatic talks a final chance. So why does this matter to all of us old regular chaps here? Because if those strikes had happened, that $5 gas that we're complaining about at the pump would have honestly looked like a bargain. We would have seen an immediate massive spike in global oil prices overnight, and that's just the tip. It could have easily spiraled into a much wider war, drawing in even more US troops. We literally dodged a massive bullet this week, but the tension is still incredibly high. Closer to home, though, we had a really heartbreaking tragedy in California on Monday. A mass shooting happened at the Islamic Center of San Diego, which is the largest mosque in that entire county. To give you an idea of what was at stake, this happened right in the middle of the day. There were over 200 kids from pre-K to 3rd grade inside the Islamic school on the property. The gunmen were 2 teenagers, just 17 and 18 years old, wearing full camouflage. And just to add to the heartbreak, the mother of one of the boys had actually called the police a couple of hours earlier to report her son missing, also stated that he was suicidal and armed. The 2 gunmen pulled up to the mosque and opened fire, killing 3 men out front. The victims were a beloved local shopkeeper named Mansour, a neighbor named Nader or Nadir. He was always helping out, and the mosque's longtime security guard, Amin Abdullah. And when I say the count could have been so much worse, here's why. So as soon as the shots started, Amin didn't just run for cover. He used his radio to scream a warning to the teachers inside the school to lock their classrooms immediately. Then he physically blocked the gunmen from getting inside the main building where the children were hiding. Because Amin put himself on the line, not a single child was physically harmed. The gunmen fled the scene and took their own lives in a car a few blocks away. Police are officially investigating this as a hate crime because they did find a suicide note with white pride rhetoric and anti-Islamic writing in their car. Amin Abdullah was a father of 8 children. He literally sacrificed everything, but he saved hundreds of souls that day. It's truly so heartbreaking that this continues. I know the conversation is the same every time, but Amin is the literal definition of a hero, and I hope that his loved ones feel that love and gratitude and support from their community. Now, shifting gears entirely to something that sounds like celebrity gossip, but actually has a crazy legal twist. Let's talk about Shakira. I'm so sorry. If you're a Shakira fan, you might have heard snippets over the last few years about her massive multi-million-dollar tax fraud battle with the government of Spain. Well, Spain's High Court just dropped a bombshell ruling and completely acquitted her. Not only did she win, but the court ordered the Spanish Treasury to pay her back 60 million euros. So that's roughly $70 million when you count the interest. Here's the legal turning point that blew the case wide open, and it all comes down to a calendar. So, under Spanish law, to be considered a legal tax resident, you have to spend more than 183 days a year living in the country. The government claimed she owed them money for the year 2011, but the court actually went back, looked at the logs, and realized she only spent 163 days there, just 20 days shy. On top of that, she wasn't even married to her ex, Gerard Piqué, yet. Their relationship was brand new, so legally, Spain had absolutely no right to touch her global income. Shakira put out a pretty fiery statement from Miami afterward. She basically said the government used a false narrative against her for a decade, treating her as guilty from day one, just to send a threatening message to scare regular taxpayers. And honestly, even if you're not a fan of her music, this story actually matters to regular people too. It's a huge reminder of how powerful government tax agencies can be when they overreach and why having clear, objective laws matters. If the state can just arbitrarily decide that you owe them money based on a hunch, then none of us are safe. And that actually brings us to our next story, because if you think the Spanish Treasury is intense, wait until you hear what's happening right now with our own DOJ and the IRS. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche just announced that the government is creating a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund run by the Department of Justice. And if you're like me, maybe you're wondering, now where on earth did this come from? Well, it's the result of a massive civil settlement. Donald Trump, his sons, and the Trump Organization sued the IRS, claiming the agency willfully failed to protect their private tax records when a contractor leaked them to the New York Times and ProPublica a few years back. So, how does this fund actually operate? Well, it's basically set up to provide financial payouts to Trump allies who claim they were unjustly or politically investigated and prosecuted by the prior Biden administration. A 5-member commission appointed by the Attorney General is going to hand out the money, and the fund is set to wrap up in December of 2028. But what does this mean for you and me sitting at home? Well, 2 things. First, that $1.776 billion isn't coming out of a magical pot. It's drawn from the federal government's General Judgment Fund, which means it's funded entirely by your taxpayer dollars. And mine too. I pay taxes. Second, the average citizen cannot file a claim or see a dime of this. It's strictly restricted to people claiming political persecution by federal agencies. Critics are essentially calling it a taxpayer-funded slush fund for political allies, while supporters say it's a necessary correction for government overreach. So I'll let you be the judge. However, you know I love a story within a story. So here is the hidden story within the story that is getting totally buried by the mainstream media. And I think it's a little bit juicy. If you're not into politics, maybe not. I don't know. So first, you need to know about a U.S. district judge named Kathleen Williams. When Trump originally filed this lawsuit against the IRS, Judge Williams noticed a massive, unprecedented legal paradox. You have a sitting president suing federal agencies that directly report to him. So in other words, he's essentially suing himself. So back on April 24th, Judge Williams stepped in and ordered both sides to submit legal briefs to the court by May 20th, which is tomorrow. She wanted them to explain if a president even has the legal right or jurisdiction to sue his own administration. It was a massive constitutional question that could have permanently limited presidential power. And this is kind of the wild part. So the DOJ and Trump's legal team abruptly settled and dismissed the case just hours before her deadline. By paying out the $1.776 billion and closing the case immediately, the administration completely bypassed a binding judicial ruling. They used a self-settlement to evade court oversight and created a massive payout fund without ever needing Congress to vote on it. Right now, nearly 100 members of the House are raising red flags about this executive branch loophole. And honestly, it just goes to show you, sometimes things look perfectly calm on the surface, but underneath, there is an absolute pressure cooker of hidden tension building up until it finally blows. And speaking of things building up pressure underneath the surface until they completely erupt, that brings us to our main topic today. Yesterday was the anniversary of the catastrophic Mount St. Helens eruption back on May 18th, 1980. You might already know the story, but what most people don't realize is just how many active sleeping giants we are living next to right here in the United States. But before we talk about our volcanoes, let's look at what happened on that Sunday morning in 1980 because it changed everything that we thought we knew about volcanic destruction. For months, Mount St. Helens had been shaking. Earthquakes were rattling the area, and steam was venting from the top. But the craziest part was the north face of the mountain. Magma was pushing up inside it, causing the side of the mountain to bulge outward by 5 feet every single day. It was literally a ticking time bomb. Then, at 8:32 a.m., a 5.1 magnitude earthquake hit. The entire bulging north face of the mountain completely collapsed in the largest landslide ever recorded in human history. With the weight of the mountain suddenly gone, the volcano basically uncorked like a giant bottle of warm champagne. So by that I mean all that magma inside was packed with trapped, superheated gas under immense pressure. Look at it like the mountain was the cork. And so the second that the landslide removed the cork, aka the mountain, the pressure dropped instantly and those trapped gases violently exploded outward. But instead of blowing straight up, typically when we see volcanoes in movies or TV shows, they're shooting upward, right? This blasted sideways. A massive wall of superheated ash, rock, and gas surged out over 300 miles per hour, completely obliterating 230 square miles of forest in a matter of minutes. Trees that had stood for hundreds of years were snapped like toothpicks. The ash shot 15 miles into the air, turning midday into complete pitch black darkness across eastern Washington. And tragically, 57 people lost their lives that day. So when I lived in Portland, colleagues at work would talk about it because we could see it from our office. And so it was brought up quite often, actually, about how they could hear the explosion all the way in Portland. When we visited Mount St. Helens, you can still see and walk on the various scars like 40 something years later. I mean, you can see the dried lava still. It's crazy. It's tragic, but it's beautiful. If you're ever in the area, I suggest visiting Mount St. Helens. And if you've ever looked up this eruption online, you have most certainly seen the most famous and honestly haunting photograph from that entire event. Maybe you've even seen it at a restaurant or some other business if you've been in that area. It's a photo of a 30-year-old, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, volcanologist, I'm not sure. His name was David Johnston. And in the photo, he's sitting outside in a folding lawn chair next to his trailer at an observation post called Coldwater 2. It's about 6 miles away from the mountain, so very close. In the photo, he's holding a notebook, he's smiling right at the camera, and honestly, he's looking totally relaxed, totally in his element. He looks happy to be there. And that photo was taken on May 17th, just 13 hours before the mountain blew. But what makes that picture so haunting and chilling, aside from the fact that this is his last photo, first of all, David wasn't even supposed to be on duty that weekend. A graduate student named Harry Glicken was scheduled for the shift, but Harry asked David to swap with him so he could attend a job interview in California. David agreed, drove up to the ridge, and took his place. The next morning at exactly 8:32 a.m., David was looking right at the mountain when that 5.1 earthquake hit and the north face slid away. He grabbed his radio and his voice broke the silence, screaming to the USGS headquarters, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it." Those were his final words. Seconds later, that 300-mile-per-hour lateral blast of superheated gas and rock completely obliterated his ridge. David's body was never found, and the only thing search teams ever recovered years later were a few mangled pieces of his USGS trailer. But here's the thing. David Johnston is a massive hero. So in the weeks leading up to the blast, he was actually the loudest voice, fiercely fighting to keep the public and loggers evacuated from that danger zone. His stubbornness saved thousands of lives. Today, that exact spot where he died is called Johnston Ridge Observatory, where you can stand and look right into the crater. Also, just a crazy final eerie twist. Harry Glicken, or Glycan, I'm not too sure. I couldn't find the pronunciation. You know, the guy who swapped shifts with him and survived. Well, 11 years later, he was killed by a volcanic eruption in Japan. So not to make light of his death or anything like that, I don't mean to make a joke, but that is some serious final destination, you can't escape fate type of shit. But David's sacrifice is a stark reminder of why scientists treat volcanoes with so much respect, because Mount St. Helens isn't an isolated anomaly. If you ask the average person how many volcanoes are in the US, they'll likely say, oh, I don't know, like 3, Mount St. Helens, maybe somewhere in Hawaii, and the giant one under Yellowstone. Those are true. Uh, good luck sleeping after you learn this, because according to the U.S. Geological Survey, the United States is actually home to 169 geologically active volcanoes. That makes us one of the most volcanically active countries on the entire planet. Now, when geologists say active, it doesn't mean that they're currently spewing lava right now, obviously. It just means they have erupted within the last 10,000 years, and they're expected to do it again. But here's the part that's probably going to keep you awake at night, or at least it keeps me awake sometimes. So out of those 169 active volcanoes, the USGS has labeled 18 of them as very high threat volcanoes. These are the ones scientists watch 24/7 because they are unstable, highly explosive, and sit dangerously close to major population centers. So, if we're looking at what could realistically blow in our lifetime, say the next 50 years, geologists are keeping their eyes glued to 3 main giants. First up is Mount Rainier in Washington state. This is arguably the most dangerous volcano in America. It looks like a beautiful postcard perfect backdrop for Seattle and Tacoma, but it's actually a sleeping monster. Rainier is covered in more glacial ice than all the other Cascade volcanoes combined. If it erupts, all that ice melts instantly and mixes with volcanic ash, creating massive, boiling mudslides called lahars. I think I'm saying that right. These mudslides would flow like wet concrete, basically, down the rivers, right into the valleys where hundreds of thousands of people live. Next is Mount Hood in Oregon, or as I call her, Hood Baby. And I'm honestly glad that I didn't really know about this when I lived there, because we would go to Hood quite frequently. It's like an hour from Portland. Honestly, sorry to go on a tangent, but I just miss Portland. It's the perfect space. Like, you're an hour from the coast, and you're also an hour from a huge snowy mountain. It's just so underrated, in my opinion. Say what you will about Portland. It's changed. It's not as cool as it was in the 90s or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think it's cool. I loved it. I miss it all the time. Anyway, like I said, Mount Hood sits just 50 miles from Portland, and she is overdue for a major shakeup. It has a high probability of generating explosive ash clouds and fast-moving avalanches of hot gas and rock. If Hood wakes up, it could shut down major shipping routes, contaminate the water supply, and rain ash down onto Portland. And finally, excuse the pronunciation, you have Kilauea and Mauna Loa in Hawaii. Now, these aren't explosive like Mount St. Helens, so they won't blow a mountain apart, but they are practically always active And they can unleash massive, unstoppable rivers of lava that can wipe out entire towns and infrastructure in a matter of days. And look, I hate being this person, so I'm not saying that you have to pack your bags and move across the country today. Volcanoes give warnings, thankfully. Scientists use seismographs and satellite data to catch every single tiny rumble and bulge weeks before anything happens. We're now light years ahead of where we were in 1980. So, for example, if you visit Yellowstone, you can see just how monitored volcanoes are today. It's pretty crazy and a little reassuring. But it does mean we are living on a dynamic, breathing continent. And while the active ones get all the press, the ones that really fascinate me are the dormant ones because they are totally asleep, but they still have a pulse. So let's look at the dormant fields because some of them are closer to home than you think. When a volcano is classified as dormant, it means it hasn't erupted in thousands of years, but its underlying plumbing system is still intact. There's still magma down there, and the volcano still has the potential to wake up. It's essentially just a sleeping giant taking a really, really, really long nap, and we're not totally sure when it's going to wake up, if at all, or what could cause it to wake up. It's kind of a mystery. And if you're listening to this in Colorado, like me, we actually have one right in our backyard. It's called the Dotsero Volcanic Center, and if you've ever driven down I-70 toward Glenwood Springs, you have driven right past it near the town of Eagle. It looks like a massive hollowed out crater right off the highway. Dotsero last erupted about 4,000 years ago, which sounds like a long time, but in geologic time, it's like yesterday. While it's completely quiet right now, scientists still keep an eye on it because it is technically a dormant system. It's not dead, it's just sleeping. And for all my listeners tuning in from the Midwest, hi, Mom and Dad, and Darcy. You might think that you're totally safe from this stuff, but think again. I mean, you're safe. Don't worry. I'm not trying to scare you. Sorry about that. You don't have to worry about active eruptions, but the Midwest is actually home to some massive, fascinating, extinct volcanic history. Down in southern Illinois, there's a place called Hicks Dome. It's basically a hidden 10-mile wide underground volcano where a massive pocket of magma and gases violently blasted upward 270 million years ago. It never quite punctured the surface to spew lava, but it bowed the Earth up into a giant dome that scientists are still studying today. And if you go farther north, closer to home, the Lake Superior region across Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, you are literally walking on top of a billion-year-old volcanic graveyard called the Mid-Continent Rift. Over 1 billion years ago, the North American continent tried to rip itself apart, and endless floods of lava poured out of giant cracks in the earth. If you've ever gone hunting for agates on the beaches of Lake Superior, you are holding the remnants of ancient Midwestern lava. Oh, so cool, right? And that brings us perfectly to the third and final category, extinct volcanoes. These are the dead ones. Their magma supply has completely cooled down or moved away, their internal plumbing is broken, and they are never, ever going to erupt again. The coolest part about extinct volcanoes is that they are all around us, and most people don't even realize it, much like the ones in the Midwest. If you've ever looked at the Table Mountains, I think it's North Table Mountain, South Table Mountain in Golden, or hiked around the Spanish Peaks down south, you are looking at the ancient weathered remains of volcanic activity from millions of years ago. They pose absolutely zero threat to us today, but they stand as these beautiful, silent monuments to just show how wild and violent our landscape used to be. And I think that's really cool. So, from the political pressure cookers in Washington to the literal magma chambers heating up under the Pacific Northwest, it's safe to say we live in a world where things are constantly shifting right beneath our feet. Wouldn't you agree? And that is all I have for you today, folks. Are there any dormant or extinct volcanoes in your area? Or active ones? Any that you love to visit, send me a DM. If you have pictures, send me those. Again, my DMs are empty and they're just waiting for you. If you liked this episode, please rate, review, share, all that good stuff. Subscribe anywhere you're listening and follow along on Instagram at indistinct.pod or at Eliza Hollister. You can also send me recommendations on what you want me to talk about in future episodes. I love doing deep dives, so I'd love to hear more topics to get into. And in the meantime, I did watch Bring Her Back. Guys, it's messed up. It's icky. Oh, it's a little slow at first, and then it gets nasty. I also started the new Yellowstone spinoff, Dutton Ranch. I just love Beth and Rip, and I think it's really great. If you liked Yellowstone, this is much more in line with Yellowstone. I also started Off Campus. I might be older than the targeted demographic, but 2 episodes in and I'm liking it. My friend Shannon, hi Shannon, she said it's already in her top 5, and I'm seeing more and more people talking about it online, so I thought I'd check it out, and I'm liking it. I also see a lot of talk about Widow's Peak, so I might give that a shot soon. I'm still holding strong watching Euphoria. I have so many thoughts, but I think I will wait until the finale to get into it if you want me to talk about it. We can all agree that it's weird, right? If you want to discuss movies or TV or music or whatever, my DMs are open for that too. We also just went on our first camping trip of the season near Jefferson. Little did we know that 25 Boy Scouts were going to be there as well. But honestly, it was still really nice. I mean, they were loud during the day, but like, they're boys, whatever. I was able to still read a bunch. I finished reading Northwoods. It starts off in Old English, but as time goes, it gets into current English, and it's actually an amazing book. Basically, it's just a book about one specific house and all the different people and animals and whatever that have lived or passed through that house. It's really good. Now, I'm currently reading Anatomy of an Alibi, and I got like halfway through in a day. Not quite halfway through, but almost. I love a good whodunit or a mystery, especially if there's some psychological aspect or a good twist to it. And I read her other book, First Lie Wins, in like 2 days because it was so good. So I figured I'd give this a shot. And so far, so good. I will make sure that I note these in the show notes. And I mean, maybe you can find me on Goodreads. We can also discuss camping or books in my DMs too if you want. Basically, I'm just begging you guys to message me and share my episodes. Thank you so much for hanging out and listening to me blab on and on every week. I really, really do appreciate it. This is so fun to do, and I like doing it. We will chat next week. Keep your tanks full because you never know when the prices are going to double up on you. Love ya. Love you.